So there's companies doing audio podcasts, and there's ones doing video podcasts, and there can be a huge difference between those two. And one is much better than the other one for businesses, especially. And I'll tell you why. Here's the reason.
Lee, I've been having something going around in my head lately, and that is that when we refer to podcasts, I'm finding more and more people still think that means audio, not video. But video is taking over podcasts.
Yeah. I mean, even if you look at where we started, if you go back as far as just 3 years ago, for example, even when we talked about podcasts internally, we would have started off thinking about audio. And we began pushing clients to say, look, you need to start putting your podcast in a video version. So they almost all started as audio and became video. And then it became where we know we had to ask on a call, actually, right? They would call and say, we want to do a podcast. We began having to make sure we asked, what are you talking about? Is it a video podcast or an audio podcast? Because even though they kept saying the same phrase, we knew it was changing from assuming audio to assuming video. And now I'm pretty sure we just assume video on every call.
So here's the question. If you have an audio podcast, that's great because it fits in your workday. You can easily take it in during a commute, to your lunch, when you're exercising, while you're doing tasks. But where do you put it? Video, on the other hand, helps put a face to your brand. And if you're selling expertise, showing up on camera really builds that trust, right? But most importantly, everywhere you want to put your podcast so people find it, okay, whether that's social media or LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever, well, that's video.
Well, that's the thing. Audio podcasts never had discoverability, right?
No.
And so when we were transitioning from audio podcast to video podcast, one of the main selling points was, look, if you want discoverability, you need to be on the world's second largest search engine, YouTube, and that's with video. So that was the easy way to push people or to help them move into video. That's when they were only audio.
Yeah.
But then we've seen the shift. It's great. We assume it's video.
So given that, when is it good to do an audio podcast? Is that still a thing? Is it still useful?
Well, think about that progression. First it was, hey, we're doing an audio podcast. Should we do video? And we would say, if you can, you should do video as an add-on. Then it became, we would say, it's not or, it's and. You do audio podcast and the video podcast. But now it's totally flipped to where we're going to start with a video podcast and you already have an audio podcast. So why not? So instead of first it was or, then it was and, now it's why not? You already have the audio.
Now, certainly up until recently, one of the big arguments for doing audio, well, there's really two of them. One is perceived as being easier to do. And obviously you don't have to show up with your makeup on or your hair done.
Hair done. Yeah.
But also, in many cases, it was cheaper to do audio because doing the video part of it, there's additional cost to it. The question is should that even be in the conversation right now? And I ask that earnestly. Like, if you're a business, should you be doing an audio podcast at all? Or should you absolutely be involving video in your process? And why is that just hands down, an argument you can't counter?
If it's a question of podcast or not, just remind me, I think we have a website called podcastornot.com. I don't know if it's still up. If you're listening, if you're watching this, go find out if it's still up and put in the comments podcastornot.com if it's still there. So if that's the question, podcast or not, then yes, at least do audio because that's content you can create from a conversation. You can create relationships with people, whether they're executive in your industry, maybe outside your company, people you want to meet, potential customers. So yeah, have the conversation. And we have some people we work with who we just say, look, no promise to do video podcasts. We're not going to ask you to do that. You don't want to do it yet, but turn the camera on and let's just see what happens. And every single time we get video shorts, they go, oh, wow, Yeah, I do want to post that.
You make a great point. The conversation probably wouldn't exist if you didn't engineer it by
Yeah.
having this mechanism, this platform, this methodology to facilitate the conversation. And what can you learn through that conversation? What can you share through that conversation? Like you said, relationship foundation, creating a foundation for a relationship, or elevating a relationship by getting back in front of that person and helping promote what's important to them. So, and then
Yeah.
memorializing that by just having the podcast at all, because you're recording that conversation. It's a great chance to memorialize it and then share it. I often say to people, and I think I've said this before, when you think about having a podcast, think about it as you're having a conversation in a coffee house somewhere and I'm secretly recording it. And then I come up to you afterwards and I say, what a great, useful, incredible conversation. I wish more people could hear it. Luckily for you, I secretly recorded it. How about we share it with the world? And you
Yeah.
go, oh my God, that'd be amazing. Well, what if we did that on purpose, right? So,
Yeah.
so audio podcast will achieve that.
Well, I
Um,
was just on a podcast right before we began recording today. I was a guest on a podcast,
yeah.
and we were discussing the whole concept of podcasting. And we both have marketing agencies, and we both own a podcast, and we end up on other people's podcasts. So it's very
Yeah.
meta. And we're talking about trying to show our clients the ROI on doing a podcast. And one thing we both agreed on for sure, we agreed on a lot of things, but one of the things was that the traditional metrics of downloads and listening, none of that holds a candle to the true value of, like you said, the relationships. Because I have, just from my podcast, I've met people, started relationships, started business relationships. Even the podcast that I was just on, I was asked to come speak somewhere in the future to one of their events.
Hmm.
Relationships, things grow and come out of these conversations. And if you were to say to someone, can I pick your brain or can I have a meeting just to talk to you? That would never work.
Right.
But to say to that same person, come on my podcast,
It's
that's
a gift.
it's an easy gift. Yeah, it's a gift to them.
What do we like to talk about more than anything? This thing that's important to us. In a lot of cases, that's our business or
Our
our
business,
what we
ourselves.
do in our life, right? But
Yeah.
but let's get back to the discoverability thing that you mentioned. So
Okay.
audio, it's great for distribution and getting that conversation done. But video really supercharges the
Yeah.
ability to have that content discovered. YouTube's a search engine, and you can repurpose video into, many pieces of many content assets.
Yeah.
How should people be thinking about, in your opinion, the difference in discoverability for your company, your brand, the things you want to share, audio versus video from a podcast standpoint?
Well, you mentioned discoverability. So there's only two ways to get your message out there in terms of podcasting or video podcasting. Is either discoverability, meaning they find you where they already are, or you announce yourself to them. So if you have an audio podcast, our question is going to be, what is your email list? Like, can you announce it? Do you have a means to tell the world that this thing exists? Your email list, your social media followers, or your social media content creation on the other level. What do you have as a tool to announce that you have this audio podcast? On the other hand, with the video, you have discoverability. So if you're on YouTube and you have shorts or Instagram or TikTok, maybe that soundbite is interesting enough to where someone goes, they find it on their like them. So for them tab. So for example, if I have a short from our conversation today, for example, that says, podcasting is great because that podcasting is great phrase may trigger something that's interesting to someone on the interest graph on TikTok or YouTube. Now they've discovered the clip. They like what I said. They can click on it, go to the full video, and then it's been discovered, right? So then they become a part of your world without you having to send out something to them. That's what video podcasting allows you to do.
I mean, one of the big things that's often said about podcasts is people learn about your podcast not through an article, but because someone told you about it.
Yeah.
So you have to create shareable content, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference between a few people learning about your podcast. And just because you have 50,000 followers on LinkedIn doesn't mean 50,000 people are going to listen to your podcast when you share it with them. But what's going to happen is one person's going to listen to it and go, "This is gold," and shares it with their people and say, "You got to check this out." That's how people get to your content. Well, if you don't have platforms to share it on and something to share, how is that supposed to happen? And
Yeah.
so I mean,
It's unbelievable to
obviously,
me.
pardon me?
Like, we've seen businesses who say, we have no social media, we have no email list, we want to do an audio podcast. What kind of number should we expect the first month? I almost want to say zero because what's your strategy? And we can come in and build a strategy to help you get listeners, but they just think that, if you build it, they will come. It doesn't work that way. You don't just record a recording, send it to Apple. Apple isn't going to promote it. Spotify isn't going to promote it. You need to promote it. On the
Right.
other hand, video, YouTube actually will promote it if it's interesting.
Sure. Think about what you skip over if you're
Yeah.
on LinkedIn or on social media. If you see, some audio with a little waveform, if the content catches you, then you're going to pay attention. But if you haven't taken the content in, there's no visual stimulus for you to stop and check out what that content's going to be because you're curious about the person looking at you, right?
And
So
even
there's a
then, like on LinkedIn, the discoverability of a post is still connected to who you're connected to. Whereas on YouTube, a total stranger can find your content.
You mentioned LinkedIn too. Let's think about this. You want your business to be following the leader, or do you want to be leading the conversation? And if you
Hmm.
want to be leading the conversation, look at LinkedIn, for example. What are they doing? They're absolutely all about video now. It's a big thing for LinkedIn is video. You have to be paying attention to that and saying it isn't everything they do, but more and more people are posting on video and they're investing in video and they see the way of the future. So you got to have something to fill that or someone else is going to be there instead of you.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but, and this is a bit off subject, but if you have video content, it's definitely on subject. For the first time, I've seen LinkedIn do something innovative for video ahead of the others. I don't
Mhm.
think this isn't on TikTok or Instagram. They have in your video feed now, as you scroll up and down vertically, then you can scroll horizontally, and each horizontal scroll will have a trend of the day or a trend, and then you can add a video to that trend. So it's like if you visualize, we were scrolling
Yeah.
horizontally, but to the right of that are 5 other columns that
Yeah.
you don't see, and each
Yeah.
column is a trend. And you can add to that column as you're scrolling. That's pretty innovative, I think. And again, bringing it back home to video podcasting, if your video podcast is throwing off shorts, then you can be in that feed.
It makes me think about like if you were trying to raise money for your company and there were 10 possible funding sources, but only 3 of them do you qualify for unless you do this other thing. But if you do this other thing, you qualify for all 10 potentially. 3 is better than 0.
Yeah.
If you do 0, you're out of business. But if 3, you have a chance. But if you do this other thing, you've got 10. Well, audio is the 3 and video podcasting is 10. You're
Yeah.
getting up to the plate more. Now, what about from there's no question that having video podcasting versus audio podcasting presents a lot of advantages in terms of discoverability.
Yeah.
But what about the actual execution of being able to do it? Now a lot of people are thinking, video podcast. Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? This is a television production every time I do this thing.
Yeah.
Is that
It's
a
funny you
fair way to
said
look at it?
television. Yeah, because this is going to sound weird, but now a podcast, it's a talk show. Hey, marketers, imagine harnessing the power of conversations to elevate your brand's authority and visibility. With Content Monsta's podcast production services, you create a platform to connect with executives and subject matter experts, fostering relationships that position your brand as a thought leader. Our expert team collaborates with you to craft engaging podcasts, which can be repurposed into videos and social media content, maximizing your reach across platforms. Don't let content creation challenges hold you back. Partner with Content Monsta to transform your marketing strategy and reach more customers. Visit contentmonsta.com today to get started. If you go back to the days of like the height of talk shows, like the Oprahs or whatever, even now, you have talk shows, they don't have microphones sitting in front of them and they call it a talk show. But the minute we put a mic in the picture sitting beside them, we call it a podcast.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we've gone back 30 years and said, oh, well, now we're going to take this microphone, ignore all the mic technology. We're going to put it right in our face and call it a podcast. When really, we're in an era where anyone can create their own talk show. And it doesn't have to be called a podcast, even it's a talk show. And you can invite anybody in your industry, any expert, guest, whatever, on your talk show. Now, for the sake of discussion, yeah, we're probably going to still call it a podcast for a while. But in reality, it's a talk show that you can now produce, and the lift is nowhere near what people think it is.
You can hop on a Zoom call with somebody and you're talking via video. You can record that video. You have a microphone on your webcam. Most of the work is done. The only difference that you bring to the table when you really purposely do a video podcast is you need to make sure you elevate the quality of the audio and the video and pay attention to some of the branding attributes and the style and professionalism with which you're going to present that particular piece of content and formulate and strategize that content. But
it's as easy to look like a Zoom call if you do a Zoom call, but that isn't the goal of most businesses, right? You want to look more professional. And so while the technology may feel like a Zoom call, the way we produce things, the reality is it requires understanding of little things that make it professional enough to portray your brand in the right light, from, coaching your executive to the right mic, the right lighting, the right post-production, the right planning before you even produce. There's a lot to it that brings value to those who help produce video podcasts. So I don't want to give anybody the idea that, I already have a Zoom account. That means we also have a podcast. It isn't quite that easy. As you were alluding to, it starts off with that, but you know that even this isn't a commercial, but even for our company, we see people who have started with Zoom and realized they were sold a pipe dream that it's not possible to do that quality that they want on just a Zoom or software platform.
The advancement of technology and tools that we employ in doing the work that we do with our clients has made producing video podcasts easy for the podcaster, for our clients, time efficient to do and cost effective to do. You couldn't have done that in the past with the same amount of cost efficiency and ease. Now you combine that technology and that innovation with the skill set that producers like us bring to the table. And now anyone can have that talk show, that podcast, that video platform, and all the assets that come with it.
Yeah.
But it feels to them as easy as having a Zoom call from their perspective.
Yeah, especially for the guests. And that's one of the things we tell people when we produce. Like, they come to us and say, hey, Lee, Marc, we've been trying to do this thing, but we need to make it easy for our executives.
Yeah.
And we tell them, look, our goal is to make it for them as easy as a Zoom call. But on the back end, we're going to do all the work we know is required to have a good outcome that looks good, sounds good, represents your brand. If you're a marketer struggling to create content that's truly unique to your brand, here's the key. Your experts and executives are your most valuable content assets. Conversational content like videos and podcasts featuring your team stand out above all other content. So instead of creating content that sounds just like your competition, start leveraging the unique voices inside your company. Thought leaders and authentic conversations build credibility and engagement. At Content Monsta, we specialize in remote content production, meaning we coach your people to be comfortable on camera, then we capture and produce high quality videos and podcasts featuring your team and customers. No need for expensive production crews, long production plans, or complex setups. Want to see how it works? Visit contentmonsta.com today to learn more.
Now, speaking of representing a brand is usually not just audio. A brand is visual. That's why you have a logo, you choose colors, you care how you dress. But you also have visuals that help tell your story. Sometimes it's visuals of products or charts, or we've produced video podcasts before where there were very important visuals added in the edit that helped really clarify the points that the guest was making, charts or pictures of equipment or whatever like that. That's something you can't do with audio. You have to imagine
This is
it in your
true.
head. And if you want a very specific story told, you have to have the visual to be able to do that.
Well, we can also look at it from another angle. Since we're talking about businesses and video, businesses have always been, or for a long time, been creating video, but they've been looking at it from a big time production standpoint of
Sure.
bringing in a crew, schedule a bunch of time, disrupting the office,
It's a big to
high
do.
expensive. Yeah. And so let's think about coming down from that a bit and realize that, with those things you mentioned, graphic design, B-roll, animation, whatever, all those things can be used to polish a conversational video so well that the viewer doesn't even perceive the difference between the one you spent $30,000 for versus the one you spent $3,000 for. They can't tell the difference because the value is in what was communicated and how it was post produced.
There's another thing here too, is I think one of the reasons that people consider, do I want to get into the video end of podcasting, is they are perceiving what you're saying, but it's also like, how much time out of my executive's day is this going to be?
Hmm.
Am I putting them in for a half day shoot?
Yeah.
What's the risk involved? Are we traipsing in a film crew into our office, or do I have to send my person into a studio somewhere? What if they work out of their home remotely, on the shores of Maine somewhere, and that's actually where they work? How are you supposed to get them into a nice studio where this is going to happen? It's just,
You
and
know,
then you give up on it and you say, you know what, it's just not worth it. We'll go with audio or we'll do nothing. And by creating the ease of access here and the ease of production, the ability to do this remotely at the same level of quality, arguably, that you could do in any other way of doing production, the end result still reflects your brand visually the way you need. You still see that person on your screen. You still have the level of quality that you want your brand to be represented by, but the
yeah.
process is accessible and
Well,
affordable.
that's one of the few gifts that COVID gave us was that we accept being where we are. Like you would not have seen a newscaster broadcast from their kitchen in 2017,
Hmm.
but now we think nothing of it. Same goes for business video and podcasts. We've had clients who still, the brain still hasn't changed over yet to realize it's okay if you're at home for your podcast. You don't
Yeah.
have to be in the office with your corporate logo behind you. In fact, it's less effective if it's that staged. Like just be where you are, and that lends to authenticity.
Yeah.
And so we've had to tell people, look, it's okay if your guest is where they are, if they're at their beach home or if they're on their back porch. It's okay. That's who they are. It makes it more believable. Let it be. We'll polish it on the back end. We'll coach you to make sure the audio and video looks good, and we'll polish it with B-roll, whatever. But we have to, that's one of the main things we have to teach nowadays is that it's okay to be where you are. It's okay to be human, have a great conversation, and it will benefit you in the quality of your content.
Funny you mentioned the word human. I was just thinking how, audio podcasts really are amazing because they present an intimacy. I often say to the people that we work with, you're not speaking to 1,000 people or 10,000 people or however many people you're hoping will hear this message or this information.
Hmm.
You're speaking to one woman named Molly while she's jogging and listening to your podcast. That's who you're talking to. That's intimate, right? But video allows you to do that while at the same time humanizing you and people seeing you are a real person that's accessible to them, not at arm's length because I don't see you. It's like, you're in a book somewhere. You're right in front of me. You feel accessible to me. And if we even see you in your home office or whatever, you know, it also gives us, I know a lot of people have listened to business podcasts because it helps them have confidence in their business decisions because they see these people are me 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And I'm hearing from them how they got to that point. And the fact that you realize that they're real people who make mistakes or had, angst in their decisions, and you learn about all that journey, it's very, very helpful for people to hear that. Well, imagine going one step further where now you see them in their environment. The amount of impact that makes and engagement that creates for you is, you cannot be overstated how useful that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's wrap this up, and I want to say, kind of as a closer, that there is no either or when it comes to audio podcasts or video podcasts, because half of video is audio. And so
Mm.
there's so many pluses for doing a video podcast. We talked about searchability, discoverability. We talked about the humanness of it. There's no reason not to start with a video podcast, even if you're just going to capture clips for promotion. And once you've done that, you already have the audio. So there's really no reason not to have the audio, but start with video. It's much more efficient, effective, and you'll learn once you get into it that the process is just so much easier to start with the video, and you'll have audio as a byproduct.
I don't see any reason to say anything more than that.
Oh, okay.